Hello and welcome to the Esports Biz Show. I'm your host, Justin Jacobson. This week we'll be discussing esports teams. Just as a disclaimer, nothing here is intended as legal advice, as all the information is for educational purposes only. This week's guest is Mike Schwartz. Mike is the head of esports for OG Esports. Prior to that, he worked at Immortals Gaming, the LA Valiant Overwatch team, and COG as a player development coach. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
My pleasure. So to start, tell us about your past esports and gaming experience. What was the first game you played, and how'd you get involved in the esports and gaming business?
Yeah, I'll probably describe myself as a lifelong gamer. So I started off playing Duke Nukem with my dad when I was like 6 years old on the PC. Maybe not the best, parental guidance there, but it got me involved in loving PC stuff. And been kind of picking up ever since. I would say my first esports experience was StarCraft Brood War. My cousins got me into that, and I logged thousands of games in that going through grade school and high school. So, I've probably touched on every major title, like your RuneScapes, your World of Warcrafts. Loved all the Blizzard titles and everything. But yeah, StarCraft was kind of the one that kicked me into the esports side. Played a lot of StarCraft 2 when that came out. Was super hyped and thought I was actually good at the game until I started playing a couple amateur tournaments and not doing so well. But then once StarCraft 2 kind of died off, that's when I really found League of Legends, and that's what really drove me into the space. You had the LCS, you could tune in, you could watch it. It was much more accessible to your mainstream audience as opposed to, watching like Star League in Korea and stuff and GSL. So once I got into League, that kind of picked up momentum, and I've been doing that ever since. So I still play relatively regularly, even though I'm on a Dota team now. But yeah, the league was kind of the thing that really got me going into mainstream esports.
So how'd you kind of transition from, a spectator and player to then working on the pro side?
A lot of luck, I think, is the the key factor there. So, the story I like to tell is, I was going to college, was working to go to law school. Actually, that was the plan. Was actually working with writing my senior thesis on how transformative use would impact streaming on Twitch. That was kind of a big thing for me. Trying to see how fair use would develop as streaming and the creator economy would grow. So wrote a paper on that, and was looking really just to do more like law and entertainment IP jobs and kind of segue that into the video game side. But I found a post on Reddit at like 2 a.m. one day looking for a player development coach. And I was like, you know what? Why not apply? And this is around Christmas 2016. So just shot an application out, and I was like, yeah, if I hear back, great. If not, deposit's ready for law school. So heard back around the holidays, did some interviews with, it was Devin Nash, the CEO at the time, and talked to Zix, who was the coach. I guess I interviewed well enough and flew out in January to go be the player development coach for CLG.
Wow. So, right, it's like door A or door B. You go to law school and you're working with Justin, or you're, openness and jumping to CLG. So what kind of influenced you to kind of choose one over the other?
I think it was just like a practical thing. When I took, law school is always going to be there. LSAT scores are good for a few years, and I figured, worst case scenario, it's just good experience, right? If I wanted to, I could go to CLG. If it didn't work out, a year later, I could just reapply and go to school a year later. It's pretty common. I already took a gap year from college before going to school just to do some normal work and pay off the crippling student loans. But yeah, I figured law school was always there, so I was like, why not take the chance? There's no real downside to it. So my parents were a little disappointed, I would say, but it worked out for the best.
It definitely did. So tell us about OG Esports a little. What are the games that they compete in?
Yeah, so OG, most famously is known for their Dota 2 roster, which won the international twice. Also won, I think we're at 6 majors now. So very successful in the space. Some of the most legendary figures in the Dota space have been, through here, No Tail, Seb, Anatops and Jerax, the winning roster. So a lot of the fame is there. And then we also have a Counter-Strike team. So that's been around since about 2020. So we've had that for 3 years. Those are the main 2 games we stay in. We've had a Valorant team previously before franchising, but right now we're really just focused on those 2 titles.
So what's your role with them, and what's kind of your day-to-day like?
Day-to-day, ask me any different day. I think we'd do something, if it's in the off season, I'm doing roster moves, right? We're doing contracts, we're negotiating, we're trying to build the rosters out. Normal day-to-day, it could be working with content teams to figure out the strategy for how we want to tell the stories of our players and our growth throughout the scene. Could be working with partners, traveling to events, trying to develop and push the commercialization of what we're trying to do. So literally any of that could happen on any given day. I mean, yesterday it was contracts and transfers. Today it's working with content strategy. Tomorrow hopefully I get another day off, but meetings, and just an internal alignment before the Christmas holiday. So all that every single day, and talking to players, just catching up with the coaching staff, seeing how the performance is going. So all of that plus more.
Amazing. So, do you guys have streamers and content creators in additional to competitive players, or?
Yeah, so we've had some, but I think with the streamers and creators, we look at them less as like a full service roster. We don't leverage it as like a talent agency. We use them for specific activations. So we did the Seattle and Lisbon hubs, which are around the international for Dota 2, and we had Gorks, who's a famous streamer for Dota, and he activated around some of those things. But we really like to tie these in with specific activations. So if we're doing these like post-event shows, then we'll bring some influencers in, but nobody really on the roster full time to just like be a variety streamer or something.
Is there some interest in that? Is it just not really fit into what you guys are working on?
There's definitely interest. I think again, it has to fulfill kind of a specific purpose for us. Just having somebody on the roster to push numbers isn't something that we're super interested in. We're a competitive first organization. Esports is the focus. So as we're looking at how can a streamer or an influencer help us push that narrative, I think that's the important part. And generally, you want to leverage the players' brands that you have as opposed to just bringing in external ones, because it just makes more sense.
Definitely interesting. So when you're scouting a potential professional that you might sign, what do you look for? How do you kind of determine who you might work with?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the scouting aspect of the esports side, a lot of it kind of comes down to like the coaches and the staff that are working there, and even the players that you have already. Because as good as I am at Dota, which I'm not, the players, the ones who are going to see the other talent in in their pub games and other matches, are going to look at what they're doing. The coaches are going to be evaluating and saying like, okay, where are we weak? What can we improve on? What do we see in these new players that are coming up? And really relying on them. So I think for the actual skill set, it's kind of what you have already, and then building out from there. If you're looking at the kind of like the non-specific game skills, you want a decent personality, somebody who's like willing to put in the work and effort. So you need people who are aligned with the vision of what you want to accomplish. For OG, it's winning. We don't really settle for less than that in a way. So obviously, we don't win every game, but you don't have the intention to be able to be a winner. So looking for players who have that kind of that mindset and that drive, I think that's part of it. And also how they're viewing their own impact and future in the game, right? It's not just I want to play pubs and then play on stage and leave. It's, are you concerned about your brand? Are you concerned about how you're going to be impacted? Really, what are the other intangibles you can find that want to drive you to not just be the best player, but also the best person for the team?
Interesting. Do you generally structure the deals as more long term or short term, or how does it work with players you work with?
I mean, it's pretty variable. I think most times you want to have a little bit more leverage in the deal, so a little bit longer term. I mean, a lot of times you'll see people, they'll announce they'll sign a 3-year contract, and 6 months into it, the players are transferred or gone. So generally, I think like 2 years is a pretty healthy average for a contract length, and in most esports titles. Sometimes if you get a long, star player, you might push for the 3-year. If it's a bit of a gamble, maybe you're only doing about a year contract. So something between 1 and 3. You really don't see 4 unless you're certain that's kind of like a long-term fit. So yeah, probably around the 2-year mark is a pretty comfortable number.
Interesting. So is there a certain metrics or performance that you look at in order to even be eligible? Like how do you know when it's like time for you to potentially go pro, or that teams are going to look at you?
Yeah, I think luckily most games that have like a popular esports scene, there's some metric, whether it's MMR, Elo, etc. That once you hit it, like League of Legends is probably the easy one, right? Where you hit challenger, you're in the top 0.001% of players. You'll probably get looked at. You'll be matched in games with other professional players, so you'll see that. Once you start seeing the trend of you're playing with people who are semi-pro to professional, you generally like, hey, you're good enough to at least play with them on an average basis. Then I think it comes down to how much you impact those people in the games, right? If you're just destroying people in Face It Pugs, for example, and players take note of that, they might bring it up in a meeting where if you're looking to make roster changes, say, hey, I saw this guy, could be good. Coach will look at you, and then you play on like amateur stacks and like the lower tiers, like your intermediates, etc. If you do well, you get promoted, you get noticed, and obviously the more you're competing at the higher level you're competing with the amateur space, then it's, hey, maybe we'll take a chance on this guy. So
right? So if you're in these pubs and you're just beating up on all the pros, there's going to be a lot of DMs coming your way. So be
Yeah, I mean,
ready.
it's a little less, I would say, like just do good in your normal matchmaking games, right? It's obviously going to be, there's players who are going to win, but they never get signed to a team, and like, oh, why is this player is good? He wins all his matches. But there's also, your own personality, how you interact, how you think about the game, because you can be mechanically skilled, but if your concepts of the game, and if you're not involved in the scene, you'll put your name out there, and you're just kind of random Joe 111, and you're doing well in a pub game, maybe that's not going to do it for you. But if you're showing up on podcasts, if you're on a team, if you're leading, if you're making results and impacting more than just yourself by being on a ladder, generally you'll get more positive feedback and input, and maybe coaches will start taking opportunities. So you have to climb the ladder, but yeah, it's accessible at least.
Interesting. So definitely all you aspiring pros out there, this is you got to get out there and grind, and it's more about than just your results. It's also about how you interact, how you impact the game, and how you play your role, right? Like sometimes the best players in the team are just the best role player and just does their job, right? The rebounder just rebounds and guards the best player. Like you don't have to be scoring 30 points a game to do your job and your team wins.
Scoring 30 points a game will probably help you though if you're doing that. But obviously, if you're not winning and you're not on something, like nobody cares about the tier 5 team that's got a kid who's putting up 30 kills a game if you're never advancing out of that and that person's never moving up. That's actually more of a red flag, right? You want to put yourself into more challenging situations and show up against that adversity when you're competing. So
amazing. So how can coaching and player development help esports and just players that are trying to be pro or that are pros already?
yeah, sorry, was that a question, or is that just like a
Yeah, I mean,
statement?
do you
Yeah.
like is there I always think coaching. It's like how much can a gaming coach really help you, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the coaches are, I would say are pretty impactful, right? Because you have things that you just don't have the time of day, right? If you're a pro player, you're generally practicing mechanically speaking, 6 to 8 hours a day, full-time job level. And then there's all these things outside of it. Are you watching, game footage, demos of other teams? Are you looking at the draft and seeing how, different champions interact? Are you looking at the items that you can build in the games, right? And teams employ full-time analysts for each of these positions, in a lot of times. So when you see something like, hey, we've reduced the damage on X ability by this percentage and the interaction with this item is now going to be tweaked in this manner where it's reduced by 1 second. That could have wide-ranging implications on how the game is actually played. It can make a champion or hero, from a D tier pick to an S tier pick, right? The timing and lineups of grenades, like I sit in the server myself. Sometimes I just get bored and I throw grenades in CS and try to find ones that are working for my games, right? But that takes an hour or two of time. So having the coaches be able to look at that, review that footage, and consolidate that data down to say, hey, here's the strategy we can use. This is why we think it's good. And then instead of having to actually find it and process it, you can actually just say, oh, okay, here it is. Let me just check through this real quick. So yeah, coaches definitely help in the technical side, and also we've seen an evolution of performance coaching, sports psychology, mental health, physical therapy, etc. Because once you maximize your efficiency, which is not attained right now, but when you start maximizing that efficiency on the in-game side of things, then there's every other factor. And it's like, well, how you feel about the game is going to impact how you perform. How you're physically, in shape is going to impact how you perform. So we start looking for those extra 1, 2, 3% that can add up. And when you're at the elite level, that is the difference, right?
amazing. I think that's the great point and why you start to see this trend of coaches and analysts and mental and nutritionists and all of these different coaches beyond just, hey, we're gonna go and play together and watch some film, because there's more to this. And I think as an outsider, someone who's not that involved in it, you might not see that initially. It's like, oh, well, why do I need a coach? Well, as you mentioned, there's so much going on here that it's not really possible for a professional to break down everything while keeping up with what they have to do.
Right. And if you're looking at how you practice, right, I think a lot of people historically would say, oh, these are gamers, they're playing 16 hours a day. And it's like, you will get better. If you're playing 16 hours a day, I'm hoping if you're being at a good level, you're getting better, right? You're seeing more, you're getting more experience, you're seeing more instances, you can kind of build pattern recognition across that time. The goal then as a professional is to optimize that usage of time, because if you're playing 16 hours a day, you will hit a point of burnout at some point. You will get to a level of it's not operating as efficiency. So somebody who's practicing for 10 hours at 100% efficiency will be better than somebody practicing 16 hours at 60%. That's just how this will work out. Ironically, the other end of the curve is if you practice at 16 hours at 100% efficiency, you're basically an Olympic level athlete, and that's the goal. But not a lot of esports teams operate at that level, right? They focus on the gameplay because that's the thing that's the base requirements, and then you kind of have to reach a threshold where the gameplay no longer can improve with an exponential increase in time. So if you're doing that and you're getting to like 20% effectiveness on a practice day, then okay, maybe it's something to say, take an hour practice away and let's go work on our mental health. Let's go work on our, let's go to the gym maybe. Let's do these things because that will give you more results in the longer term. But short term, everyone's just like, yeah, give me 16 hours a day, let's play. And that was the old mindset in League of Legends, is go to Korea boot camp for 16 hours a day, and we'll get better. And you will, but in isolated instances, as a long-term development, you're kind of going to lag behind because nobody thinks the reason they're so good at 16 hours a day is because the structure is so good that they're actually practicing at 80% efficiency at that time. So
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that obviously, as you mentioned, it's been learned over time, and it's probably something that, teams have learned over doing this, where you did these 16-hour burnout sessions and you realize, wow, maybe if we only did 12 hours and we did an hour of meditation and an hour of team bonding, we might be in a better situation overall.
Yeah. Generally, I would say like there's, we used to do back on CLG, we used to have time where we did meditation, right? But it was a 10-minute thing. It was part of a pregame routine that we would do, is get a 5 to 10 minute stretch, warm up in, get the body flowing, do 10 to 15 minutes like visualization or of some kind, right? It didn't need to be meditation. It could be just hopping in, then maybe a little pregame routine. So 30 minutes, right, to set yourself up in the right mindset to be successful. And that's all you really needed at that time, is just doing something that got you in a habit, got you in the zone, and then you can kind of benchmark out from there. It's like, okay, how is the performance after this? You don't need to have, this full, because you can overdo it on the other side too. If you spend 3 hours meditating, you're not really going to be in the mood to play competitive games. You might just be in the mood to go chill on a beach somewhere. So there's a balancing act here, and everyone has their own things, and that's also part of working with the players, is making sure maybe this guy needs 30 minutes to sit down and visualize. Maybe this guy only needs 10. Maybe this guy needs to do 30 minutes of aim training, but this guy needs 5. So you can just play around with it. But as long as everyone on the team understands like different, avenues to find where we all need to meet to make the team successful. So
awesome. Well, definitely something that, as you mentioned, professionals, aspiring ones have to get used to and understand that coaching and implementing this coaching is part of it. And, being coachable is a trait, right? You have to understand how to take feedback and implement it. And sometimes there's other people that see things differently than you. And I think that's the biggest thing that, a coach brings, or any outside person, give you the second pair of eyes to look at something different. So as you mentioned, you worked at some other esports teams prior to OG, including Immortals and CLG. So what stuff did you learn at some of those teams that you've now been able to bring over to OG, and some learnings in general?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, is since I've worked across a wide variety of games, right? League of Legends, Overwatch, CSGO, basically coming across, you can find similarities in all the different game titles, So from a mechanical perspective, I like to think that I have a decent understanding and grasp of like the game itself, which, as somebody who went from coaching in outside the game perspective to management, is helpful to relate to all the players, because it's not just like, oh, he's a suit who just knows how to do Excel spreadsheets and whatnot and write documents. It helps you get that relatability factor. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned, is just how to interact with the players at a level that makes them feel comfortable, but that I can also convey the needs of the business towards them as well. Because I think a lot of their players tend to be isolated from the organization in a way. Not that they're not signed to us and they don't wear our jerseys, but a lot of players don't necessarily understand the implications of like what they're doing for the business. Like, what am I actually paying you for? And like, oh, well, we want to win. It's like, yeah, of course you want to win. That's the baseline. But like, why do I want you to win? What's the impact of you winning? It's like, oh, we can sell more sponsorships. So we get more media rights. We can do all these other things. And we can develop and scale the business. And then being able to sit down and convey, like, this is what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. This is why it's important. This is why I need you to do these things. This is what the long-term vision is for why we're actually doing all this together. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing I've learned, is how to communicate on a day-to-day with the players and how to make them feel comfortable and aligned. It's like, this is the organization's vision and goal as a business. And then kind of lining it up with what they want to do as a player and say, like, this is where we're all going together. It's like, you might have a different way of phrasing it, but this is where we really want to get to is, yeah, we want to win at the end of the day. Here's what winning is to everybody. It's not just lifting a trophy, I mean, in most cases it is, and that's always going to be helpful. But getting to that point is, it's team effort. So we got to make sure that we're communicating, aligning. And I think I do a pretty good job of doing that with all the teams.
And how receptive are they? I know players, especially some more younger ones, it's, like you said, they just want to focus on winning and winning tournaments and prize money, and that's their focus. But that's not always a win for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, well, winning for the org is almost always going to be a win for everybody. Getting a trophy usually comes with more prize money, more sponsors, etc. But with the players, I think it just puts things into perspective for them as to, like, what they're doing and how their careers are going to grow. When you look at it, one of the things I used to talk about with the players was, I would ask sometimes, like, what are you going to do when I fire you? And it's kind of a weird thing to ask when you sign a player. Is like, think about the end of your contract when you're signing it. But it's to put things in perspective. I've had players say to me, like, oh, I'm just going to go streamer, I'll coach. And I'm like, what credentials do you have to do that? Like, you just got signed to a team as a player and you're going to coach? Like, what do you know? It's like, oh, I can just stream. It's like, do you know how much rent is? Like, you're going to be able to pay your bills? And then it's like, So putting that into perspective is like, oh, okay, there are other things in my life that are important that I need to make sure I'm cognizant of. And winning as a goal is great. That's the pure ambition we want to have. But also, there's a realistic, the steps that we need to take to make sure that we're getting to that point. So, hey, don't take things for granted, because you could be off the team in 6 months. It's up to you to perform. Like, once I sign you, like, I can't hop in the server and I can't click the heads for you. I can't click use your keyboard. You got to do that on your own, but you got to take the steps to make sure you're in the best position to do that. I can help you get there, but ultimately it's on you. So what are you going to do to prevent yourself, to put yourself in a position to be successful? We're doing our job, but again, it's all on the person that we're signing and putting our trust in to actually deliver it. So
amazing. I think that's a great kind of question where it's like, yeah, like, are you going to go on Twitter and rip us for dropping you? Or, if you want to be a streamer, maybe now while you're on the team, you start developing streaming, you start building that into your, repertoire and what you're doing.
It's a balance as well. You can't just, like, there are times when you need to focus on being the best player in the world, right? But there's an off season for every esport. And I think people fail to utilize that to develop their own brands. Like, it's pretty low effort to make a tweet after a game, hop on, GG's lost, you could do something, you could add commentary, you can hop on a podcast for an hour, you could do these things that just make sense. Like, nobody's going to turn down exposure. It's like, if one of my players wants to go on a podcast, sure, like, let's let them do that and say, is this going to be helpful for my brand as a player? Is it going to be helpful for the company's brand? Like, just understand the best practices to communicate, like, this is what we're doing, give some insights. It helps everybody in the system. So, but a lot of people are just like, nope, I lost, I got to play more. I won, I can take a day off. Very simple mindset there.
So, kind of bringing this towards the end, what advice do you have for in talent looking for organizations who are trying to go pro?
I would definitely make sure that you understand kind of the commitment it's going to require from you, like, because it's going to vary. But if somebody who's like a gold mid-level player is going to say to me, like, I want to be a pro, it's like, okay, realistically, like, how are you going to get to the next steps, right? Platinum, diamond, challenger, etc. How old are you? Like, how much time are you to commit to this process? Make sure you have a plan to get there. And if you're already at that level where it's like, okay, I'm good enough skill-wise to become a pro, what am I doing to expose myself to that environment? Are you playing in 5 stacks? Are you playing, in tournaments? Are you reaching out to professional players? Are you trying to network? Are you trying to do these things? So depending on where you are and how much time you have, those are definitely the key focus points. And then the further along you get is more, how much impact are you making on the community itself, right? Are you putting yourself in positions to be noticed and to be successful? Build your brands, build all these other things up. If you're talented, then you just got to give yourself more opportunities. Like, it's different. Just because you're the best player in the world doesn't mean you're going to get handed that opportunity. It just increases the odds you will be. So that's what I would focus on for any aspiring pros, is just make sure you have a plan and keep it realistic, grow your brand, and be as impactful as possible to as many people as you can be, because it'll just increase your odds of getting noticed.
That's some great advice. So everyone out there, definitely take heed. And yeah, it's great to be performing well, but you also have to get noticed and build your own personality. And so people know you. And then it's like, oh, wow, he's great. Oh, I saw his Twitter. Like, oh, I follow him. I saw what he's doing. Now it connects, it clicks, and it makes it a lot more accessible for a team of your level to be like, oh, wow, well, he's doing all the right things. Why wouldn't we want to see what it's about? And,
exactly.
So what's your favorite part about working in the esports and gaming world?
Favorite part, let's see. I mean, this year might have been traveling, but I would say, I think the types of people you meet, because we're all from just some of these eclectic backgrounds. Like as esports has kind of grown, you find people just from all walks of life really coming into it, because when I joined, it was like, are you just five gamers from a basement like coming together? And it's like, no, like, this person's working a regular job and they just happen to be good at the game and they became a pro. This person worked, from the business side, coming from bigger industries like traditional football teams or something like that. So you do get this kind of, how do sports broadly and business and esports and video games kind of all converge, and I think you get this really interesting combination of people. So just being able to meet and interact with all these people who kind of share the common love of gaming and like what gaming can actually do, for the broader public.
Amazing. So what's kind of the future for OG Esports and you in the space?
Yeah, I mean, OG, I think, we got some cool things coming in the new year, so I'm not going to spoil it. But there are some things that are popping up, so that'll be nice. So if you're following us, it'll be pretty cool, I think. It's been a while, been a few months in the works to get these things done, so hopefully that gets a nice warm reception. But I mean, for OG broadly, I mean, we're just going to look at keeping, expanding to the right titles, I think, is the biggest thing for us, because we are small, and I think during the winter, as we are talking about before we started recording this, a lot of teams are kind of scaling back, and we think we have a good foothold to actually start scaling up. I think we've been pretty conservative with how we've been looking at our investments in our portfolio, but given that kind of discretion for the past couple of years, I think we have good angles to actually get ourselves involved more with different esports communities. So, we're always looking for those opportunities, and I think we found a few of them that we can get into for this year, which is really great. But yeah, just looking to grow the effort globally. I think for us, we've been primarily European, and we have a big fan base in Southeast Asia. But we want to look at other regions as well: China, Japan, North America, South America, etc. So definitely want to start pushing OG to a global brand.
Mobile? I mean, you mentioned a bunch of places that mobile seem like a
Mobile
real
gaming
winner
is,
in.
look, you don't need to. I would love to be involved in a couple of mobile titles, which shall remain nameless. But I think most people who know me understand exactly which one I'm talking about. But I mean, it's a huge phenomenon, right? So I think with our fan base and where we want to align, there's definitely a good argument to be in that. And of course, those titles kind of vary by country that you're in, but hopefully over the next year we'll start getting more involved in that scene as well.
Amazing. So, I like to try to end each episode with my 3 questions. So, what's your favorite game to watch?
Ooh, favorite game to watch is Counter-Strike, hands down. Is the
So,
best spectator esport.
so what's your favorite game to play?
Favorite game to play? That's a tough one. Because I have a love-hate, mostly hate relationship with League of Legends. But I will say right now it's probably TFT.
Okay.
TFT is probably the one I've been playing a good amount of, trying to get back to Diamond.
And who's your favorite video game character?
Video game character. Let's see. That is a tough one because I play mostly games where you're not looking at a story-driven component. But if I had to dig back, let's just say I'd probably say Zeratul from StarCraft.
Okay. Awesome. Big StarCraft guy, so I'm with you on all that.
It's tough. I was debating saying Artanis, I do like Artanis in StarCraft too, but Zeratul's an OG.
Amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. So tell everybody where they can find you and learn about what OG is working on.
Oh God, yeah. Where can you find me? I have a Twitter account apparently, or an X. Is it? What is it? Is it Twitter? Is it X? I don't even know
Twitter
anymore.
to me, so it's
Twitter
going to be Twitter.
Yeah, I mean Twitter. You can follow me at Schwartz Bruder. So my last name Bruder. That's a Gundam reference for anyone who cares. Because I do love myself some anime. Other than that, you probably grab me on LinkedIn at wherever my ad is on that. But yeah, it's just Mike Schwartz there. So
amazing. So definitely reach out to him and check what OG is doing. It sounds like they're up to some amazing stuff. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and make sure to follow me on Twitter, Justin J ESQ. Check out podcast for all our past episodes and YouTube for our videos.